Refining your research problem. Now that you've written the first draft of your research problem using the sentence frame, it's time to elevate that beginning into a fully developed, dissertation-ready paragraph. The frame gives you the basic structure, but a strong research problem requires more than filling in the blanks. It demands a clear articulation of a real phenomenon, a conceptual tension that sits inside that phenomenon, and a consequence that reaches beyond your immediate setting. It also requires that you situate the problem within a broader scholarly conversation, align it with the kind of knowledge your study will generate, and ground the entire paragraph in evidence. This is where your writing begins to shift from a general interest in a topic to a scholarly articulation of a puzzle that deserves investigation. The first step in refining your draft is enriching the phenomenon. In the simple version, you named who is affected and what issue they are encountering. But a sophisticated research problem names a phenomenon that is specific, observable, and situated inside real institutional practices, policies, or conditions. Instead of saying students are struggling or teachers are burned out, you identify a pattern or practice that could be documented or measured. This anchors your work inside the real systems where it occurs, which is essential because your problem is not an abstract idea. It is something happening in a field shaped by decisions, constraints, initiatives, and structures. After clarifying the phenomenon, you deepen the tension. The sentence frame helps you say that something is not well understood, but that phrasing only gestures toward the gap. A refined tension names a mismatch, inconsistency, contradiction, or unresolved question that sits within the phenomenon. It might be a policy that doesn't produce its intended outcome, a professional development initiative that does not transfer into practice, a technology that behaves differently than anticipated, or a pattern that is appearing despite corrective efforts. When you articulate the tension this way, your problem becomes conceptually focused. You are not simply identifying a lack of knowledge. You are locating the exact place where existing practice or understanding breaks down. From here, you expand the consequence. In the simple frame, the consequence might be a single sentence that begins with "this matters because," but in a strong research problem, the consequence extends outward into the systems that will feel the effects of the unresolved tension. That might include staffing patterns, instructional continuity, academic pathways, resource allocation, equity gaps, program effectiveness, or long-term student outcomes. This is where your writing develops institutional scale. You demonstrate why someone outside your classroom or district, someone responsible for policy, leadership, curriculum, or training, should care about your study. A strong consequence does not describe a general harm. It articulates what is at stake for a broader system if nothing changes. As you refine each layer, you also begin to signal the conceptual terrain of your study. You do not need to name a specific theory here. That belongs in the theoretical framework, but you should hint at the concepts that will guide your inquiry. When you write about writing processes, you signal autonomy, cognitive engagement, or revision practices. When you write about burnout and system responses, you signal organizational support, working conditions, or institutional coherence. When you write about course design and engagement, you signal alignment, scaffolding, or cognitive load. These conceptual signals strengthen your research problem by showing that it sits inside an established scholarly conversation, rather than floating as an isolated observation. Another dimension of a sophisticated research problem is methodological alignment. The kind of tension you describe should suggest the kind of knowledge your study will produce. Quantitative research often examines patterns, relationships, or predictors, so the tension might relate to an unexplained relationship or an outcome not yet modeled. Qualitative research often explores meaning, experience, or process, so the tension might relate to how people interpret or navigate a condition. Mixed methods research holds both a measurable pattern and an interpretive question that explains that pattern. You do not need to name your methodology in the problem paragraph, but the kind of tension you articulate should be answerable by the methodological tools you plan to use. A well-framed research problem already contains the seeds of the method. Before finalizing your paragraph, you also need to ground your claims in evidence. Citations are not optional here. They are what transform your problem from opinion to scholarship. When you say that burnout has risen, that districts are adopting AI writing tools, that transfer from professional development into practice is inconsistent, or that course design influences engagement, those claims should be supported by credible, recent sources. You do not need to overwhelm the paragraph with citations, but 3 to 5 well-selected references can show that the phenomenon is real, the tension has been noticed, and the consequence is plausible. Evidence gives your writing legitimacy and situates your problem within a documented field of concern rather than a personal impression. To see how all of these elements work in practice, let's refine an example from the simple frame into a fully developed paragraph. If I begin with the sentence frame and write, students in literacy classrooms are affected by the rapid introduction of AI-powered writing tools, but little is known about how these tools shape their writing processes. This matters because their use may influence long-term skill development. I have a basic foundation. But to refine the phenomenon, I name an actual system-level practice. Many school districts are integrating AI-powered writing tools into literacy instruction. To refine the tension, I specify what is conceptually unresolved, how these tools influence students' writing processes and revision habits. To refine the consequence, I move from a vague concern to a system-level implication. Unchecked implementation may undermine writing skill development and widen preparedness gaps. A refined paragraph becomes, many school districts are integrating AI-powered writing tools into literacy instruction. Little is known about how these tools influence students' writing processes and revision habits. Unchecked implementation may undermine essential writing skill development and widen existing gaps in academic preparedness. Notice how this paragraph is anchored in a system, shaped by a clear conceptual tension, aligned with a methodology that could examine both patterns and experiences, and pointed toward institutional consequences. Let's refine a second example. Using the sentence frame, a student might write, teachers are affected by burnout after the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is not well understood how schools are supporting them. This matters because burnout can lead to turnover. To refine the phenomenon, I state the documented pattern. Teacher burnout has increased in the years following the pandemic. To refine the tension, I name an actual system-level contradiction. Schools have implemented wellness and retention initiatives, yet attrition remains high, especially in under-resourced districts. To refine the consequence, I articulate the cascading institutional effects. Ongoing attrition disrupts staffing stability, weakens instructional continuity, and threatens long-term student achievement. The refined paragraph then becomes, teacher burnout has increased in the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. School systems have implemented wellness and retention initiatives in response, yet educator attrition remains high, particularly in under-resourced districts. Ongoing attrition disrupts staffing stability, weakens instructional continuity, and threatens long-term student achievement. This version reveals a system-level problem grounded in evidence, shaped by conceptual considerations of organizational support, and aligned with qualitative or mixed methods approaches. Before we close, it's important to clarify what a research problem is not. It is not a literature review. It does not summarize everything known about the issue. It is not a purpose statement. It does not describe what your study will do. It is not a solution. It does not prescribe what should happen. It is not a theoretical explanation. That belongs later. The research problem is simply the analytic doorway into your study. It defines a phenomenon, surfaces a tension, and articulates the consequence of leaving that tension unresolved. As you refine your draft, you should also think consciously about your scholarly positioning. Ask yourself where your problem sits within the broader field. Whose conversations are you entering? What does your field suspect but not yet understand? What practice or policy space does your problem belong to? Strong research problems do not appear in isolation. They intervene in ongoing scholarly or professional conversations. Positioning your problem within a recognizable problem space strengthens its relevance and coherence. Another helpful distinction is understanding whether your problem is primarily a problem of practice a problem of understanding, or both? Problems of practice originate from implementation failures, misalignment, policy shifts, performance gaps, or resource constraints. Problems of understanding originate from conceptual gaps, unclear mechanisms, underexamined experiences, or processes that are not yet well explained. The strongest research problems often braid these together. A practice that is not functioning as intended because a concept has not yet been sufficiently understood. Making that relationship clear deepens the sophistication of your writing. As you finalize your paragraph, a useful diagnostic is to ask, could a reader point to the phenomenon in the real world? Is the tension a specific mismatch or unresolved question rather than a general interest? Does the consequence reach beyond individual experiences into institutional or systemic stakes? Are there citations that demonstrate the issue is real and recognized? Does the paragraph hint at the conceptual ideas and methodological approach that will guide the study? When all of these questions can be answered with confidence, you know your research problem has moved from a simple sentence frame to a strong, scholarly articulation of the puzzle your study is designed to help solve.